The luxurious first-class cabin froze when the flight attendant blocked Amara's path. "Ma'am, I think there's been a mistake. This section is for first-class passengers only." The wealthy passenger's stares pierced Amara like daggers as her legitimate ticket was openly questioned. No one imagined that within minutes, Marcus Jenkins, billionaire, Amara's devoted husband, and majority owner of this very airline, would walk through that door and completely transform the power dynamic in this cabin of hasty judgments. But what happened next left everyone speechless. Have you ever been judged before others knew your true worth? Subscribe now to see how this powerful story of prejudice and vindication unfolds. The morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Jenkins estate, casting a golden glow over Amara as she packed her carry-on bag. At 43, Amara Jenkins possessed a quiet elegance that needed no designer labels to announce itself. Her smooth dark skin glowed with natural beauty, and her closely cropped natural hair framed intelligent brown eyes that missed nothing. "Are you sure you don't want me to come with you?" Marcus asked, his tall frame leaning against the doorway of their bedroom. At 48, Marcus Jenkins carried himself with the understated confidence of a man who had built an aviation empire from nothing. Amara smiled at her husband of 15 years. "You have that board meeting tomorrow. Besides, I don't mind traveling alone." "At least take the private jet," Marcus insisted, his brow furrowing with concern. Amara zipped her suitcase with finality. "Absolutely not. We agreed, the jet is for business only. We can't talk about sustainability at my charity gala last week and then burn fuel flying one person." Marcus crossed the room and wrapped his arms around her waist. "Always my conscience," he murmured into her hair. "But you deserve the luxury after raising 10 million for those education programs. That's why I upgraded you to first class." "I would have been fine in economy," Amara replied, though she didn't protest further. This was their usual dance, Marcus wanting to shower her with the trappings of their wealth, Amara preferring to keep a low profile. "The airline's majority shareholder's wife flying economy? My board would have a fit," Marcus laughed, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "Besides, it's Stellar Air. I need to know how our premier service is running." Amara rolled her eyes. "Always the businessman." "I'll join you tomorrow night," Marcus promised, checking his watch, the only outwardly expensive item he wore daily. "The resort is preparing everything for our anniversary weekend." As their driver loaded her modest luggage into the town car, Maya, their household manager, approached with a small package. "Mrs. Jenkins, don't forget your medication for the flight," she said, handing over the small container. Amara nodded gratefully. Few people knew about her mild anxiety when flying, ironic, given her husband's business. Before marrying Marcus, she'd been a flight attendant herself, but an emergency landing early in her career had left its mark. "Thank you, Maya. Please make sure Mr. Jenkins actually eats lunch today. He forgets when he's preparing for board meetings." As the car pulled away from their understated yet luxurious home, Amara gazed at the simple gold watch on her wrist, Marcus's gift when they'd first met, when she was still serving drinks in first class and he was just another passenger. Back then, she had no idea he was already building what would become Stellar Air. She smiled at the memory of their first conversation, how he treated her with a respect few passengers showed to the cabin crew. She had fallen in love with the man, not his growing fortune. "To the airport, Mrs. Jenkins," the driver confirmed. "Yes, James. And please, it's just Amara." After 15 years, she still couldn't get used to the formality. As they drove through the city, Amara mentally reviewed her charity foundation's next projects. Unlike many in their wealthy circle, she didn't sit on boards merely for show, she worked tirelessly for educational equality, something she had been denied growing up in her underserved neighborhood. Marcus hadn't just given her access to resources, he championed her vision at every turn. That thought warmed her as the airport came into view, its control tower rising like a sentinel against the morning sky. Stellar Air Terminal gleamed with marble floors and soaring glass ceilings, a testament to Marcus's vision of making air travel elegant again. Amara entered through the main doors rather than the VIP entrance, dressed in a simple beige dress and comfortable flats, practical yet elegant. The only hint of luxury was her handcrafted leather handbag, a gift from an artisan she'd helped through her foundation. Around her, travelers rushed in designer outfits, brandishing the latest smartphones and luggage that cost more than what some families made in months. Amara observed them quietly as she made her way to the check-in counter, where a young attendant greeted her with a polite smile that faltered slightly as she scanned Amara's appearance. "Economy check-in is in the next section, ma'am," the attendant said, not unkindly but with certainty. "I'm flying first class," Amara replied, sliding her identification and confirmation across the counter. The attendant's perfectly shaped eyebrows rose slightly. "Oh. I see. Mrs. Jenkins." She typed rapidly, then blinked at her screen. "You're in our premier suite service. Let me call a concierge to escort you." "That won't be necessary," Amara said firmly. "I can find my way." A flash of confusion crossed the attendant's face. Most premium passengers eagerly accepted such perks. "As you wish, Mrs. Jenkins. The premier lounge is past security on the right. They'll announce your boarding personally." As Amara walked away, she heard the attendant whisper to her colleague, "Must be using her husband's points or something." The security line stretched ahead, filled with impatient travelers. A TSA agent directed the crowd, his eyes sliding past Amara to beckon a white businessman in an expensive suit. "First class priority screening," the agent called out. Amara stepped forward, showing her boarding pass. The agent's expression shifted from dismissive to surprised. "Oh, right this way, ma'am," he said, his tone noticeably different. A woman in line behind her scoffed audibly. "Is first class just letting anyone in these days?" she muttered to her companion, jewelry clinking as she gestured toward Amara. Amara's back stiffened, but she kept moving forward. These moments weren't new, the assumptions, the dismissals, the surprise when she claimed spaces people didn't expect her to occupy. In the priority screening lane, Amara found herself behind a group of executives in matching Stellaire corporate pins. One of them, a tall man with silver hair, glanced back at her and did a double take. "Are you in the right line?" he asked, his tone suggesting he already knew the answer. "Yes, I am," Amara replied simply. The man frowned. "This is priority screening for first class and elite members." "I'm aware," Amara said, showing her boarding pass. The man squinted at it skeptically before turning away, muttering something to his colleague that made them both chuckle. Amara recognized him vaguely from company events, mid-level management who'd probably never spoken directly to Marcus. After clearing security, Amara made her way to the premier lounge. At the entrance, the host's gaze swept over her simple attire before asking with barely concealed doubt, "May I help you?" "Amara Jenkins, Premier Suite Service to Bora Bora," she stated calmly. The host checked his tablet, surprise registering on his face. "Of course, Mrs. Jenkins. Please, come in." Inside, the lounge was a sanctuary of hushed luxury. Business travelers clustered around power outlets, wealthy couples sipped champagne, and social elites surveyed the room from plush armchairs. As Amara selected a quiet corner seat, she noticed the subtle glances, the whispered comments, the assumptions radiating from around the room. A server approached, less attentive than he was with other guests. "Something to drink?" he asked, without offering the champagne he'd been bringing to others automatically. "Water, please," Amara replied. When the server returned with her water, no ice, no lemon, unlike the carefully garnished glasses elsewhere, Amara heard the boarding announcement for her flight. She gathered her belongings, aware of the eyes following her as she walked toward the gate. "Premier Suite passenger for Stellaire Flight 401 to Bora Bora," the gate attendant called over the speaker. "Mrs. Jenkins, we're ready for your priority boarding." The boarding gate for Stellaire's flagship route to Bora Bora exuded exclusivity, with its mahogany paneling and dedicated staff dressed in the company's signature navy and gold. Amara approached the priority lane, where a small cluster of obviously wealthy passengers waited to board first. Victoria Reynolds, Stellaire's head flight attendant, stood by the scanner with perfect posture and a practiced smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Tall, Blonde, and impeccably groomed, she embodied the airline's luxury brand image. When she spotted Amara approaching the priority lane, her smile flickered momentarily. "Excuse me," Victoria called out, her voice carrying just enough to draw attention. "Economy boarding will begin in approximately 30 minutes. This lane is for our premium passengers only." Several heads turned. A man in an Armani suit lowered his financial newspaper with a smirk. A couple wearing matching Rolex watches exchanged knowing glances. "I'm in Premier Suite," Amara replied calmly, extending her boarding pass. 1A. Victoria's French manicured fingers took the boarding pass as if handling something potentially contaminated. She examined it with exaggerated care, flipping it over unnecessarily. "There must be some mistake," Victoria said, loud enough for nearby passengers to hear. 1A is our most exclusive suite." "There's no mistake," Amara said, maintaining her composure. After 15 years of marriage to Marcus, she had developed an unshakable dignity in the face of such treatment. An older white woman with an elaborate updo and diamond earrings the size of grapes leaned toward her companion. "They're just letting anyone use points for upgrades these days. In my day, first class meant something." Victoria made a show of checking her tablet. "Mrs. Jenkins, is it? Are you perhaps on our standby list for an upgrade? Sometimes the system makes errors." "No, the ticket was purchased directly," Amara replied, resisting the urge to mention by whom. She could end this humiliation with one sentence about her husband, but something in her resisted. Why should she need Marcus's name to be treated with basic respect? A businessman waiting nearby tapped his Italian leather shoe impatiently. "Some of us have meetings to get to. Can we start boarding?" "Of course, sir," Victoria responded, her tone transforming to warm deference. "We just need to resolve this situation first." Another attendant leaned over, whispering something in Victoria's ear while glancing at Amara. Victoria's eyes widened slightly before narrowing again. "It seems the reservation is in the system," Victoria conceded reluctantly. "However, for security purposes, I'll need to see additional identification." Amara reached into her purse for her ID, aware that no one else had been asked for secondary verification. As she handed it over, she noticed a young black female attendant watching from nearby, her expression a careful mask hiding recognition. Amara regularly spoke at the company's diversity initiatives, though many of the senior staff conveniently found reasons to miss those events. "Is there a problem?" A deep voice came from behind Amara. She turned to see Dr. William Chen, a renowned surgeon she'd met at charity events. Unlike the others, his question seemed genuinely concerned rather than judgmental. "Just a routine verification," Victoria responded quickly, her tone warming considerably for the recognizably prestigious passenger. "Amara Jenkins is on the board of the Children's Hospital Foundation with me," Dr. Chen said, his presence adding an unexpected legitimacy to Amara's status. "I didn't realize you were on this flight, Amara." Victoria's expression shifted microscopically as she reassessed Amara. "Everything appears to be in order, Mrs. Jenkins," she said, her tone now artificially sweet. "Though these verifications are standard procedure." "Funny, I fly this route monthly and have never been asked for additional verification," Dr. Chen remarked casually. Victoria's smile tightened as she scanned Amara's boarding pass, finally returning it with a stiff nod. "Enjoy your flight, Mrs. Jenkins." As Amara walked down the jet bridge, she heard Victoria immediately begin gushing to the next passenger, a white woman dripping in designer labels, "Mrs. Huntington. How lovely to see you again. Your usual champagne will be waiting at your seat." The contrast was stark but familiar. Amara took a deep breath as she approached the aircraft door, where another flight attendant waited to welcome Premier Suite passengers. She felt the weight of the assumptions she'd weathered all her life, that she couldn't afford certain spaces, didn't belong in certain rooms, must have gotten there through some error or exception. As she stepped onto the aircraft, Amara's mind drifted back to her own days as a flight attendant, before she'd met Marcus. She had been one of the few black women in the premium cabin crew, constantly having to prove her competence, constantly having to be twice as perfect. The memory strengthened her resolve as she prepared to face whatever awaited her inside the first-class cabin. The first-class cabin of Stellar Air's flagship aircraft gleamed with subtle luxury, hand-stitched leather seats, real wood accents, and lighting designed to mimic natural daylight. As Amara stepped inside, the scent of fresh flowers and fine champagne filled the air. Victoria Reynolds had somehow managed to beat her inside, standing at the front of the cabin like a sentinel. When she spotted Amara, her smile froze in place. "I believe there's been a misunderstanding," Victoria said, stepping directly into Amara's path. "Premier Suite passengers receive a special escort. You must have missed yours." Before Amara could respond, Victoria continued loudly enough for other passengers to hear, "This section is for our premier passengers only. I'll need to redirect you." The businessman with the financial newspaper looked up, not bothering to hide his irritation. "This is precisely why I prefer private jets. No confusion about who belongs where." Amara stood her ground, the weight of all eyes in the cabin upon her. "My boarding pass clearly states Suite 1A, she said, maintaining her composure. "There's no misunderstanding." Victoria's eyes narrowed. "Perhaps you misinterpreted the boarding pass. It can be confusing for infrequent travelers." A woman wearing what appeared to be a full set of sapphires clicked her tongue disapprovingly. "Some people simply don't understand how these things work." Amara felt a familiar heat rising within her, not embarrassment but the slow burn of justified anger. She had faced this treatment countless times before marrying Marcus, and occasionally even after, when she traveled alone or dressed casually. "I understand perfectly," Amara replied, her voice steady. "And I'd like to take my seat now." Victoria's artificial smile tightened. "Let me see your boarding pass again. There must be some confusion." As Amara handed over her boarding pass once more, the cabin manager approached, a tall man with a perfectly positioned uniform hat and a serious expression. "Is there a problem, Ms. Reynolds?" he asked, his tone professional but with an underlying edge. "Mr. Harrison, this woman claims to have a premier suite reservation," Victoria explained, emphasizing woman in a way that carried unmistakable condescension. "I'm attempting to resolve the situation." The manager studied Amara, his gaze sweeping over her simple dress and natural hair with barely concealed skepticism. "Ma'am, perhaps you misunderstood your ticket classification. Premier Suite is our highest tier of service." "I understand what Premier Suite means," Amara replied calmly. "I also understand that my valid boarding pass entitles me to seat 1A. A young executive typing on his laptop barely suppressed a smirk. "Maybe she won it in a radio contest or something," he stage-whispered to his seatmate, who snickered in response. Mr. Harrison cleared his throat. "Ma'am, in the interest of on-time departure, perhaps it would be best if you accompanied me back to the gate while we sort this out." "There's nothing to sort out," Amara said firmly. "My reservation is confirmed for Suite 1A." Victoria exchanged a meaningful glance with the manager. "Security protocols, you understand. We can't have just anyone sitting in premier class without proper verification." "Just anyone?" Amara repeated, the phrase hanging in the air like a challenge. The other passengers were now openly watching the confrontation, some with discomfort, others with thinly veiled amusement at what they perceived as someone trying to claim a status they hadn't earned. Victoria leaned closer, lowering her voice. "Listen, this is becoming embarrassing for everyone. I'm sure we can find you a nice seat in economy." The condescension in her tone was unmistakable, the assumption that Amara should be grateful for whatever accommodation they deigned to offer, that she should accept being dismissed from a space she had every right to occupy. Mr. Harrison nodded toward the exit. "If you'll come with me, ma'am, we can discuss this privately." "I will not," Amara stated firmly. "I have a confirmed reservation, and I intend to take my seat." The atmosphere in the first-class cabin had transformed into a theater of humiliation, with Amara at center stage and the wealthy passengers as an entitled audience. Victoria's face hardened, the pretense of customer service slipping away to reveal the ugly prejudice beneath. "Mrs. Jenkins," Victoria said, emphasizing the name with obvious skepticism, "we have certain standards in premier class. Our frequent flyers expect a particular experience. A woman with surgeon-perfected features nodded emphatically. Exactly. We pay a premium for exclusivity. The implied message was clear: Amara didn't fit their image of who belonged in this space. The cruel irony, that she was the wife of the man who had created this very cabin, who signed their paychecks, remained her secret for now. Mr. Harrison stepped closer, lowering his voice to a threatening whisper. Ma'am, if you don't come voluntarily, I'll be forced to call security. That would be unfortunate. Are you threatening me? Amara asked, her voice calm but carrying enough to draw attention. Not at all, he replied smoothly. I'm explaining protocol for situations like this. Victoria smirked slightly. Perhaps Mrs. Jenkins isn't familiar with how these things work. The businessman with the newspaper sighed dramatically. This is precisely why I'm considering switching to Emirates. Their vetting process is much more stringent. Amara felt an old, familiar pain, the sting of being judged not by her character or accomplishments but by preconceptions based on her appearance. Throughout her life, she had faced these moments, being followed in luxury stores, questioned in first-class lounges, assumed to be the help rather than the homeowner. Victoria turned to the other passengers with an apologetic smile. I'm so sorry for the delay, everyone. We'll have this sorted out momentarily. Then to Amara, with steel beneath her saccharine tone, final boarding call for economy is happening now. I suggest you take advantage of it. A flight attendant approached with champagne for the other waiting passengers, deliberately bypassing Amara. The message was clear: she wasn't worthy of the service reserved for legitimate, first-class travelers. Amara touched the watch on her wrist, Marcus's gift from years ago, before their marriage. Its familiar weight centered her, a reminder of how far she had come and the dignity she had earned through her own accomplishments long before becoming Mrs. Jenkins. I'm not going anywhere, Amara said quietly but firmly. My ticket is valid. Any further attempt to remove me will be documented as discrimination. Victoria's eyes widened slightly at the word discrimination, a term that could trigger corporate investigations and potential lawsuits. Mr. Harrison's professional veneer cracked slightly. Now see here, is there a problem with my wife's seating arrangement? A deep voice cut through the tension like a blade. The cabin fell silent as all eyes turned toward Amara. The question hung in the air: would she cave to the pressure or continue to stand her ground? For a moment, she considered the easier path, explaining who her husband was, watching their expressions change from disdain to fawning in an instant. But something inside her resisted. Why should her humanity and dignity depend on her connection to wealth and power? Why should she need Marcus's name to be treated with basic respect? My ticket is valid, Amara stated again, her voice calm but resolute. I will be taking my assigned seat. Victoria's expression hardened, her customer service mask slipping further. Security protocols exist for a reason, ma'am. We can't simply allow anyone claiming premium status to anyone. Amara interrupted, the single word carrying the weight of 1,000 similar confrontations throughout her life. Would you like to explain exactly what you mean by that? A nervous flutter passed across Victoria's face, the momentary recognition that her assumptions might have legal implications. But she quickly recovered, doubling down on her authority. What I mean, Victoria said with exaggerated patience, is that our premier suite passengers are typically familiar to our staff. The implication was clear: Amara didn't fit their mental image of who belonged in first class. The wealthy passengers watched with various expressions, some uncomfortable with the obvious discrimination, others clearly enjoying what they viewed as someone being put in their place. In that moment, Amara's mind flashed back to her own days as a flight attendant, before she'd met Marcus, before she'd founded her charitable foundation, before she became the power behind Stellar Air's community initiatives. She had been one of the few black flight attendants assigned to premium cabins, constantly facing skepticism from passengers who assumed she was newly hired or lost. Despite graduating at the top of her class and receiving commendations for her service, she'd constantly had to prove herself worthy of spaces her white colleagues occupied without question. I was a flight attendant for 6 years, Amara said, her voice carrying just enough for nearby passengers to hear. I understand protocols very well. There is nothing in Stellar Air's security procedures that justifies this treatment. Victoria blinked, clearly unprepared for this information. You were a flight attendant? With which airline? This one, Amara replied simply. Before it was renamed Stellar Air. For the first time, uncertainty flickered across Victoria's face. The cabin manager shifted uncomfortably beside her. An older passenger lowered his reading glasses. Can we please resolve this? The delay is becoming ridiculous. I agree, Amara said. I'd like to take my assigned seat now. Victoria's composure slipped further as she realized the confrontation wasn't proceeding as expected. Most passengers she intimidated eventually gave up or backed down. If you were truly a former employee, Victoria said, her tone now openly hostile, then you should understand that we have a responsibility to ensure only authorized passengers access our premium cabins. And what exactly about me looks unauthorized? Amara asked directly. The question hung in the air, dangerous in its simplicity. Any answer Victoria gave now risked exposing the prejudice beneath her security concerns. Mr. Harrison stepped forward, attempting to defuse the situation. Perhaps we've had a misunderstanding. Let me check the manifest again. As he consulted his tablet, Victoria maintained her blockade, physically preventing Amara from proceeding to her seat. The standoff had now drawn the attention of everyone in the cabin, the original boarding process completely halted. This is outrageous, muttered a woman dripping in diamonds. Some people simply don't know their place. Amara felt a familiar surge of righteous anger, not just for herself, but for everyone who had ever been made to feel they didn't belong in spaces they had every right to occupy. For every black professional questioned in first class, every woman of color followed in luxury stores, every person of color asked if they were lost when entering elite spaces. My place, Amara said clearly, is seat 1A, as indicated on my valid boarding pass. And I will not be moved. Victoria's face flushed with anger. Security to the boarding door, she said into her communication device, her voice shaking slightly. We have a situation in premier class. As if on cue, the aircraft door reopened behind them. The aircraft door swung open with decisive force, revealing a commanding presence that instantly altered the atmosphere in the cabin. Marcus Jenkins stood in the doorway, his 6'2" frame impeccably dressed in a custom navy suit that spoke of wealth without shouting it. At 48, the silver threads at his temples only added to his distinguished appearance, and his dark skin seemed to glow with vitality despite the artificial cabin lighting. His entrance created an immediate silence, his presence commanding respect before he'd spoken a single word. His gaze swept the cabin methodically, taking in the confrontation before him with the practiced assessment of a man who had built an empire through careful observation. Is there a problem with my wife's seating arrangement? Marcus repeated, his deep voice carrying a calm authority that seemed to fill the entire cabin. Victoria froze, recognition slowly dawning on her face. The cabin manager, Mr. Harrison, paled visibly, his tablet nearly slipping from suddenly nerveless fingers. Mr. Jenkins, he stammered, straightening his posture instinctively. We weren't expecting you on this flight. Evidently not, Marcus replied, his tone measured but with an edge that made several passengers shift uncomfortably in their seats. He moved forward with deliberate steps, each one bringing him closer to Amara. The wealthy passengers who had been so quick to judge now stared in growing horror as understanding spread through the cabin like a silent wave. The woman with the diamond necklace who had commented about knowing one's place suddenly became intensely interested in the safety card in her seat pocket. Marcus positioned himself beside Amara, his hand gently touching the small of her back in a gesture that was both protective and claiming. Perhaps someone can explain why my wife is being prevented from taking her seat. Victoria's complexion had gone from flushed to ashen, her previously confident posture now notably diminished. Mr. Jenkins, there was a misunderstanding about. About what, exactly? Marcus interrupted, his gaze steady and penetrating. About whether my wife belongs in premier class. About whether she deserves to be treated with basic dignity and respect. Sir, we were simply following protocol to verify, Mr. Harrison began. Verify what? Marcus asked, his calm tone making the question all the more devastating. Whether she belongs in first class based on her appearance. The cabin fell into absolute silence, the kind that seems to swallow even the sound of breathing. The businessman with the financial newspaper had completely abandoned any pretense of reading, his eyes wide with recognition of both Marcus and the magnitude of the crew's mistake. Mr. Jenkins, we didn't know, Victoria stammered, her previous arrogance evaporated like morning dew under a harsh sun. Clearly, Marcus replied, the single word hanging in the air like a verdict. He turned slightly, addressing the cabin at large with the natural authority of someone accustomed to commanding boardrooms. For those who don't know me, I'm Marcus Jenkins, majority shareholder of Stellar Air. And this, he said, his voice warming with obvious pride, is my wife, Amara Jenkins. The revelation sent another shock wave through the cabin. The young executive who had made the comment about a radio contest was now frantically typing on his phone, perhaps searching Marcus's name and confirming his worst fears. Amara was once the youngest head flight attendant in this airline's history, Marcus continued, his voice carried easily throughout the cabin without being raised. She set service standards that we still use in our training programs today. Victoria's face registered a new level of horror at this information. As head flight attendant, she would have studied those very protocols, perhaps even admired them without knowing their creator. Marcus's hand remained protectively at Amara's back as he continued, his tone conversational but carrying unmistakable weight. I asked for this flight to be held briefly for my arrival because I wanted to surprise my wife. It seems I arrived at an opportune moment. The pause before opportune spoke volumes, a masterclass in understated threat. Did you know, Marcus continued, his voice measured and carrying throughout the now silent cabin, that before we married, Amara prevented a mid-air emergency by recognizing a passenger's stroke symptoms before even he realized something was wrong. Victoria's hand moved unconsciously to the service pin on her uniform, the one that symbolized Stellar Air's commitment to exceptional care. The irony wasn't lost on anyone present. The airline gave her a commendation, Marcus added, a hint of pride warming his measured tone. It's still displayed at corporate headquarters, though I'm beginning to wonder if anyone here has actually seen it. Mr. Harrison tugged nervously at his collar, a bead of sweat tracing a path down his temple. Mr. Jenkins, I can assure you this was an isolated incident. Marcus raised his hand slightly, the simple gesture immediately silencing the man. Incidents like this are never isolated, Mr. Harrison. They're symptomatic of deeper issues. He turned to address the entire first-class cabin, his voice projected without raising it. What we've witnessed here today is exactly why Amara's educational foundation work is so crucial. Assumptions and prejudices don't just hurt feelings, they create environments where qualified individuals are questioned, diminished, and devalued based on appearance rather than merit. The businessman who had complained about the delay now couldn't meet Marcus's eye, suddenly finding his Italian leather shoes fascinating. The couple with matching Rolexes shifted uncomfortably, perhaps recognizing their own behavior in Marcus's words. Marcus turned his attention back to Victoria, his gaze unwavering. Ms. Reynolds, is it? You've been with Stellar Air for how long? 7 years, sir, Victoria answered, her voice barely audible. 7 years, Marcus repeated thoughtfully. And in those 7 years, did you ever attend any of the diversity and inclusion trainings that Amara helped develop for our staff? Victoria's silence was answer enough. I thought not, Marcus said. He pulled his phone from his pocket, typing quickly with decisive movements. I've just sent an email to the board. Starting tomorrow, all Stellar Air employees will undergo a mandatory anti-discrimination training program. He looked directly at Victoria, his gaze steady. Ms. Reynolds, you'll have the honor of being the first participant. Victoria swallowed hard, unable to respond, her career visibly flashing before her eyes. The silver wings pin on her uniform, once worn with such pride, now seemed to weigh 1,000 pounds. As for the position of Director of Customer Experience that we've been discussing filling, Marcus continued, turning to Mr. Harrison, I believe my wife, with her previous experience at the company and her recent experience as a customer, would be perfectly qualified to take over, if she wishes. Amara's eyes widened slightly. This was the first she'd heard of such a position. Marcus had mentioned wanting her more involved in the company, but she'd always maintained her independence, focusing on her foundation work instead. The woman with the diamond necklace who had made the comment about some people not knowing their place was now intently studying the in-flight magazine, her fingers nervously twisting her wedding band. The young executive who had suggested Amara won her ticket in a radio contest had gone completely pale, likely realizing his career prospects with any company in Marcus's vast network had just evaporated. Marcus then addressed the passengers, his voice carrying a calm authority that commanded attention. "Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for the delay. As compensation, champagne will be complimentary throughout the flight." Then, just for Victoria and Mr. Harrison to hear, he added in a lower tone that still carried to those nearby, "Please ensure my wife receives appropriate attention during the flight. Your future with the company depends on it." Victoria nodded silently, her empire of arrogance completely crumbled before everyone. The transformation was complete, from imperious authority figure to humbled servant in the span of minutes. She stepped back, motioning to the other flight attendants to begin service immediately. No one in the cabin missed the irony or the lesson in the dramatic power shift they had just witnessed, not just Marcus's obvious influence, but how quickly their assumptions had been proven catastrophically wrong. The businessman who had complained about the delay now looked on with newfound respect, not just for Marcus's power but for Amara's dignity throughout the ordeal. "Your seat is ready, Mrs. Jenkins," Victoria said, her voice barely above a whisper, gesturing toward the premier suite at the front of the cabin. As Amara settled into her seat, the finest on the aircraft, with hand-stitched leather and ample space, Victoria hovered nearby, anxiety radiating from her stiff posture. "May I offer you champagne, Mrs. Jenkins?" Victoria asked, her voice unnaturally high with tension. "Water, please." "No ice," Amara replied calmly. Victoria scrambled to fulfill the simple request as if it were the most complex order she'd ever received, her hands noticeably trembling as she poured filtered water into a crystal glass. Meanwhile, Marcus conversed quietly with the cabin manager. Though their voices were hushed, the gravity of the discussion was evident in Mr. Harrison's ashen face and profuse nodding. Around the cabin, the atmosphere had transformed. Passengers who had been openly disdainful now avoided eye contact, suddenly intensely preoccupied with their phones or the views from their windows. The woman with the diamond necklace appeared particularly mortified, sinking low in her seat as if hoping to become invisible. When Victoria returned with Amara's water, she placed it on the side table with exaggerated care. "Is there anything else I can get you, Mrs. Jenkins?" "Anything at all?" "No, thank you," Amara replied simply, maintaining her composure despite the dramatic shift in treatment. Marcus joined Amara in the adjacent seat, reaching for her hand. "I apologize for the delay. The board meeting ran long, but I wanted to surprise you." "Your timing was impeccable," Amara said quietly, a hint of a smile touching her lips. From the corner of her eye, Amara noticed other passengers now watching them with newfound interest, not the earlier dismissive glances, but looks of recognition, respect, and in some cases, blatant attempts to catch Marcus's attention. The businessman who had complained about the delay cleared his throat. "Mr. Jenkins, I just want to say what an honor it is to fly with you. I've long admired Stellarair's business model." Marcus acknowledged him with a polite nod but kept his attention on Amara. The message was clear, these newfound pleasantries meant little compared to the treatment his wife had endured. Victoria reappeared, visibly struggling to maintain her professional demeanor. "Mr. Jenkins, the captain would like to personally welcome you aboard." "Please tell Captain Rivera I appreciate the gesture, but I'm comfortable here with my wife," Marcus replied. "Though I would like a word with you and Mr. Harrison before takeoff." Victoria's face, already pale, seemed to lose another shade of color. "Of course, sir." As she retreated, Amara gently squeezed Marcus's hand. "You don't need to make this into a bigger issue." "It already is a bigger issue," Marcus replied, his voice low but intense. What happened to you today happens to countless people who don't have the advantage of a last name that makes people scramble to correct their behavior. Mr. Harrison approached, Victoria trailing behind him. Marcus motioned them closer. I want to be perfectly clear, Marcus said, his voice calm but carrying unmistakable authority. What happened today was not a misunderstanding. It was discrimination, plain and simple. Mr. Jenkins, I can assure you, Mr. Harrison began. I'm not interested in assurances, Marcus interrupted. I'm interested in change. The anti-discrimination training I mentioned isn't just for show. Every employee, from the board to the baggage handlers, will participate. And to ensure it's taken seriously, completion will be tied to compensation. Victoria gasped softly, unable to contain her shock at the unprecedented measure. Furthermore, Marcus continued, my wife's experience will be used, anonymously, as a case study in how not to treat passengers. And finally, Ms. Reynolds, consider yourself on probation effective immediately. Victoria's eyes widened in alarm. Sir, you have 90 days to demonstrate that you understand what service really means, Marcus stated firmly. Not just to people who look like they belong in first class according to your prejudices, but to every passenger who holds a valid ticket. As the flight attendants retreated to prepare for takeoff, the atmosphere in the cabin remained charged. Passengers who had witnessed the entire confrontation now sat in contemplative silence, perhaps reflecting on their own roles in the incident or similar situations in their past. Dr. Chen, who had recognized Amara at the boarding gate, leaned across the aisle. Mrs. Jenkins, I've always admired your foundation work, but your dignity today was truly inspirational. Amara smiled genuinely for the first time since boarding. Thank you, William. As the aircraft prepared for departure, Amara felt a complex mix of emotions, vindication, certainly, but also a familiar weariness. The incident was resolved, the consequences in motion, but the underlying issues remained deeply embedded in society. Today it was a first-class cabin, tomorrow it would be a boardroom, a restaurant, or a store where someone else would face the same assumptions and dismissals. She glanced at Marcus, who was reviewing documents on his tablet, his presence beside her both a shield and a statement. The fight for dignity and respect was far from over, but today, at least, it had a clear victor. The Stellar Air flagship soared above the clouds, its first-class cabin now subdued compared to the drama that had unfolded during boarding. Amara reclined in her premier suite, reviewing documents for her foundation's upcoming projects on her tablet. Across the aisle, Marcus was engaged in a video conference with board members, his voice a low murmur behind privacy screens. Victoria approached Amara's seat with visible trepidation, a stark contrast to her earlier condescension. Mrs. Jenkins, we'll be serving lunch soon. Would you prefer the salmon or the filet mignon? The salmon, please, Amara replied, noticing how Victoria now avoided direct eye contact, not out of disrespect as before, but from shame. Of course. And may I refresh your water? Victoria's hand still trembled slightly as she reached for the glass. Yes, thank you. Amara observed the flight attendant's nervousness with mixed feelings. She took no pleasure in Victoria's humiliation, despite the justice of it. What she wanted wasn't fearful deference but the simple respect that should be afforded to every passenger regardless of appearance. As Victoria hurried away, Dr. Chen approached from his seat. May I join you for a moment, Amara? I've been meaning to discuss the Foundation's new educational initiative. Please, Amara gestured to the companion seat, grateful for the familiar face and genuine conversation. I must say, Dr. Chen commented as he settled in, the service has been exceptional since takeoff. I've never seen the crew so attentive. Amara smiled wryly. Amazing what a difference awareness makes. Indeed. Though I suspect in some cases, it's fear rather than understanding driving the change. Dr. Chen glanced toward Victoria, who was now meticulously preparing the meal service. Real change takes time and genuine commitment. That's why the training program Marcus mentioned is so important, Amara said. Consequences matter, but education matters more. From nearby seats, Amara noticed several passengers attempting to subtly listen to their conversation. The woman with the diamond necklace, who had been so dismissive earlier, now watched with what appeared to be genuine interest, perhaps even regret. When lunch was served, Victoria presented Amara's meal with the precision of someone whose career hung in the balance. "Your salmon, Mrs. Jenkins, with the lemon butter sauce on the side as per our standard preparation. Would you prefer fresh ground pepper?" "Yes, please," Amara responded, noting the detailed description, a marked change from the dismissive service Victoria had initially intended to provide. As Victoria ground fresh pepper over the dish, her hand still unsteady, Amara decided to address the elephant in the room. "Ms. Reynolds, I was a flight attendant long enough to know that service comes from the heart, not from fear." Victoria's hand froze mid-motion, her eyes finally meeting Amara's directly. "The training program my husband mentioned isn't meant as punishment," Amara continued quietly. "It's an opportunity to grow. I hope you'll approach it that way." Victoria's perfectly composed facade cracked slightly, revealing a glimpse of genuine emotion beneath. "Mrs. Jenkins, she hesitated, clearly struggling with words that didn't come easily. "Thank you for that perspective." As Victoria moved on to serve other passengers, Amara noticed Mr. Harrison observing their exchange from the galley, his expression thoughtful. Throughout the flight, Amara witnessed a subtle transformation in the cabin's atmosphere. Passengers who had initially sided with the crew's discrimination now seemed self-conscious, perhaps reflecting on their own behaviors. The businessman with the financial newspaper actually nodded respectfully when their eyes met across the aisle. Even more telling were the changed interactions between the crew and other passengers. Amara noticed Victoria providing more attentive service to an elderly Asian woman in business class who had previously been overlooked, as if the day's events had triggered a broader reassessment of her approach to all passengers. When Marcus concluded his video conference, he rejoined Amara. "Everything okay?" he asked, immediately sensing her contemplative mood. "Just thinking about impact versus intent," Amara replied. Today was a powerful reminder for everyone on this flight, not just Victoria and Mr. Harrison. Marcus nodded, understanding immediately. The most effective lessons often come from uncomfortable moments. "Which reminds me," Amara said, turning to face him directly. "This Director of Customer Experience position you mentioned, was that created just for today's situation, or were you planning to tell me about it eventually?" Marcus's expression softened into a smile. "It was going to be my anniversary surprise. The board approved it last month. We need someone with both the customer perspective and insider knowledge to transform our service culture. There's no one better qualified than you." Amara considered this, watching Victoria efficiently managing the service for the remainder of the cabin. It would mean working with people who witnessed today's confrontation. "Including some who might resent your authority," Marcus acknowledged. "But also with people who would welcome change. The question is, do you want to be part of making that change happen?" Before Amara could respond, the captain's voice came over the speaker system. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're beginning our descent into Bora Bora. Please return to your seats and fasten your seatbelts." As the aircraft began its descent toward the stunning blue waters of the South Pacific, Amara gazed out the window, contemplating not just the paradise that awaited them but the opportunity Marcus had presented, a chance to transform stellar air from within, to create a culture where what had happened to her today would become unthinkable. Victoria approached one final time before landing. "Mrs. Jenkins, Mr. Jenkins, thank you for flying with us today." Her words were professional, but there was something new in her tone, perhaps the beginning of genuine respect rather than the fear-driven deference she'd shown earlier. As the aircraft touched down on the island runway, Amara felt a sense of possibility. Today's confrontation had been painful but necessary, a catalyst for change that extended far beyond one flight or one airline. The overwater bungalow at Bora Bora's most exclusive resort stretched out over crystal-clear waters, its private deck offering uninterrupted views of Mount Otemanu rising majestically in the distance. As evening approached, Amara and Marcus sat on the deck sharing a bottle of wine, the day's dramatic events finally behind them. "I don't think I've ever seen someone's face change color so quickly," Marcus reflected, a hint of satisfaction in his voice as he recalled Victoria's expression when she realized who Amara was. "Though I wish I'd arrived sooner." "Your timing was perfect," Amara assured him, gazing at the sunset painting the lagoon in shades of gold. Though I admit, there was a moment when I considered simply telling them who I was. Why didn't you? Marcus asked, genuinely curious. Amara considered the question, watching a fish dart beneath their bungalow in the transparent water below. Because it shouldn't matter. My humanity and right to dignity shouldn't depend on being Marcus Jenkins' wife. She turned the golden watch on her wrist, the same one he'd given her when they first met. For years, I've deliberately avoided using your name or position. I wanted to be recognized for my own merits, not as Mrs. Jenkins. And you have been, Marcus affirmed, his eyes reflecting the setting sun. The educational foundation you've built has changed thousands of lives. The charity event last week raised more money than any other in the foundation's history. Yet today, in that cabin, none of that mattered, Amara said quietly. All they saw was a black woman who didn't fit their image of first class. Marcus reached for her hand, his touch gentle but firm. Which is precisely why the Director of Customer Experience position is so important. And why there's no one better suited for it than you. Amara looked at him in surprise. You were serious about that? I thought it might have been created in the heat of the moment. The position has been in development for months, Marcus explained. The board recognized that we need someone with both operational experience and a customer perspective to truly transform our service culture. I was planning to discuss it with you during our anniversary weekend. He gestured toward the resort around them. This trip wasn't just a celebration of our 15 years together. It was meant to give us uninterrupted time to talk about this opportunity. Amara fell silent, contemplating the lagoon stretching before them. I've been focused on the foundation for so long. Taking on a corporate role would mean dividing my attention. It would, Marcus acknowledged. But it would also mean influencing a company that employs thousands and serves millions. The potential impact is enormous. A gentle breeze ruffled the surface of the water as Amara considered the implications. Victoria and Mr. Harrison wouldn't be thrilled to report to someone they tried to remove from first class. Marcus smiled slightly. Consider it part of their education. Despite herself, Amara laughed. Then, growing serious again, she added, today brought back so many memories of my time as a flight attendant, the assumptions, the dismissals, the constant need to prove I belonged in premium cabins. Which gives you an invaluable perspective, Marcus pointed out. You understand the experience from both sides of the service counter. A staff member appeared discreetly at the entrance to their deck, carrying a covered tray. Your dinner, Mr. and Mrs. Jenkins. Shall I serve it here on the deck? That would be perfect, thank you, Amara replied warmly. As the sun disappeared below the horizon, casting the lagoon in deepening shades of purple and blue, Amara and Marcus enjoyed their meal in companionable silence, the day's confrontation gradually giving way to the tranquility of their surroundings. After the staff member had cleared their plates and departed, Amara turned to Marcus. You never stopped believing in my potential, did you? Even when I doubted myself. Marcus gently touched the watch on her wrist. Remember what I said when I gave you this? That time is the only luxury that truly matters, how we choose to use it, and with whom. Amara nodded, remembering the young businessman she had met years ago when she served coffee in first class. How he had treated her with a respect few passengers showed to the cabin crew. I didn't fall in love with Mrs. Jenkins, the billionaire's wife, Marcus continued, his voice soft in the gathering darkness. I fell in love with Amara Okoro, the woman who treated all passengers, from CEOs to the elderly traveling alone, with the same unwavering respect. Amara felt tears gathering unexpectedly. Sometimes I miss that person, the career I was building, the independence I had. She never disappeared, Marcus assured her. She's been running a foundation, changing lives, making a difference. And now, perhaps, she has a chance to transform an entire company's culture. As they sat together under the emerging stars of the South Pacific night, Amara felt a decision taking shape, not just about a job offer, but about her purpose moving forward. 1 month after the Bora Bora trip, Amara stood at the podium in Stellar Air's corporate headquarters, facing a packed auditorium of employees. As the newly appointed Director of Customer Experience, this was her first company-wide address, a moment filled with symbolism that wasn't lost on anyone present. In the front row sat Marcus, alongside board members and executives. In the back, barely visible but unmistakably present, stood Victoria Reynolds and Mr. Harrison, both now graduates of the first intensive anti-discrimination training program Amara had helped design. "Thank you all for the warm welcome," Amara began, her voice steady and confident. "Many of you know me as Marcus Jenkins' wife. Others might recognize me from the educational foundation work I've done over the past decade. But long before either of those roles, I was one of you, a Stellar Air flight attendant committed to exceptional service." She paused, surveying the diverse faces watching her with varying expressions of curiosity, respect, and in some cases, uncertainty. "What many of you don't know is that last month, I experienced our airline from a very different perspective, as a passenger who was judged not by the validity of her ticket, but by preconceptions based on her appearance." A murmur ran through the audience. The incident had become legendary within the company, though few knew she had accepted the executive position that resulted from it. "I'm not sharing this to embarrass anyone involved," Amara continued. "I'm sharing it because it highlights a critical truth: the experience we provide is shaped not just by our procedures and amenities, but by the assumptions we bring to each interaction." She clicked to the next slide in her presentation, displaying the company's service metrics, high overall, but with troubling disparities when broken down by passenger demographics. "These numbers tell a story. When passengers don't fit certain profiles, their experience suffers, not because of official policy, but because of unconscious bias. My goal as your new director isn't to police behavior but to create awareness that transforms it." In the back row, Victoria shifted uncomfortably, but maintained eye contact, a small but significant sign of growth from the woman who had tried to remove Amara from first class a month ago. "The training program many of you have already begun isn't about blame. It's about building the skills to see people as individuals deserving of respect, regardless of appearance, accent, or attire. It's about recognizing that dignity isn't something to be earned through status, it's the baseline of human interaction." For the next 30 minutes, Amara outlined her vision for transforming Stellar Air's customer experience, from revised training protocols to new service standards that emphasized respect as the foundation of luxury. She introduced mentorship programs pairing veteran staff with new hires from diverse backgrounds and anonymous feedback systems that would highlight both exceptional service and areas for improvement. As she concluded, Amara made one final point: the true measure of luxury isn't the champagne we pour or the thread count of our blankets. It's how we make people feel valued, respected, and welcomed. That's the standard Stellar Air will be known for moving forward. The applause that followed was genuine, not the obligatory acknowledgement of an executive speech, but the enthusiastic response to a vision that resonated with the best instincts of the people in the room. As employees filed out, many stopped to introduce themselves or share brief stories of their own experiences. Victoria approached last, visibly nervous but determined. "Mrs. Jenkins, Director Jenkins," she corrected herself. "I want to thank you for the opportunity to be part of this new direction." Amara studied the woman who had been the face of her humiliation a month ago. Victoria had completed the training program with high marks, according to the facilitators, showing genuine effort to examine her biases. "The real opportunity is what we do with awareness once we have it," Amara replied. "I'll be watching your progress with interest, Ms. Reynolds." After the presentation, Marcus joined Amara in her new office, a space she had insisted on locating not in the executive suite but in the hub of customer service operations. "Impressive speech," he commented, taking in the photographs she had already arranged, images not of celebrities or dignitaries, but of standout employees from throughout the company's history, including several black flight attendants from when the airline had first integrated its workforce. "We'll see if it translates to action," Amara replied, though her tone was hopeful rather than cynical. "Change doesn't happen overnight," Marcus acknowledged. "But it starts with moments like today, when someone with both the authority and the personal experience speaks truth that can't be ignored." Amara touched the watch on her wrist, a constant reminder of how far she had come and how much further there was to go. What happened in that first-class cabin wasn't unusual. It happens every day to people who don't have the advantage of a last name that makes others snap to attention. Which is exactly why you're the perfect person for this role, Marcus said. Not despite what happened, but because of it. As Amara settled into her new position, she knew the path forward wouldn't be easy. Transforming a corporate culture required more than speeches and training programs. It demanded consistent commitment to seeing the humanity in every person, regardless of appearance or status. But as she reviewed applications for her new customer experience team, intentionally seeking diverse perspectives and experiences, Amara felt a sense of purpose stronger than any she had known since her early days as a flight attendant. She had come full circle, returning to the airline industry not just as an executive's wife, but as a leader in her own right, using her voice to ensure that what had happened to her would become increasingly rare for others. The watch on her wrist ticked steadily forward, marking not just the passage of time, but the progress of change that, while sometimes painfully slow, was nevertheless unstoppable once set in motion. Dear friend, this story reminds us that dignity shouldn't depend on status, wealth, or connections. Every day, people face assumptions based solely on appearance, judgments that reveal more about the observer than the observed. True character shows in how we treat others when we think they have nothing to offer us. The next time you witness someone being disrespected or dismissed, remember Amara's quiet strength and consider being the Marcus in that situation, the voice that challenges unfair treatment. If this story touched your heart or opened your eyes, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more powerful messages that make us question our perceptions and celebrate treating everyone with respect.